Welcome back to Paranormal Asia. The story begins in a misted village in northern China, where wood beams keep the scent of incense even when no stick burns. Li Wei, 28, a city teacher, arrives to mourn an uncle. The villagers study him with a measured curiosity that feels like a plan already made. Before we go deeper, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Note it below. Some stories prefer listeners past midnight. Li Wei's aunt receives him kindly, but the house holds a red altar instead of a memorial. Fruit, candles, silk, a porcelain bride sits where a portrait should rest. At dinner they ask after his birth hour, health and dates, not his work. Conversation circles like water around a drain. In his room, folded crimson robes wait on the bed, as if the fabric has been measuring his shape. The air smells not of laundry, but of rain-soaked earth pulled indoors. Past midnight, a storeroom door scrapes. Bare feet drag once, then stop outside. Silence deepens until the boards seem to listen back. He hears only a breath and understands the intent, a warning not to wear the red. The corridor is empty when he looks, but damp soil scent lingers in the seams. Morning fog beads on eyelashes. An old ritualist sits at tea that never steams. His attention rests on almanac columns and Li Wei's birth hour. Tonight will be correct, the house decides without speaking. Outside, wine is drizzled in lines across stone, drawing a path from altar to storeroom and back again. Young men arrive with bundles wrapped in red. One shifts oddly. A pale wrist slips from cloth before being tucked away with embarrassed efficiency. Neighbors keep their doors half closed. Eyes drop when Li Wei looks up. The courtyard drains of birdsong. The altar's red begins to look like a decision, not decoration. At the village shop, a bell rings though no one enters. The keeper's hands shake, spilling salt. Old measures are pressed forward, string for a thumb, grains for a shoe, caution for a cup. He has not yet been served. Outside, a kite tail of shredded paper hangs from the lane's last tree. Dusk turns smoke gold. The altar has changed. Headdress clean, pearls reset, comb teeth polished. A portrait rests beside offerings. A young woman with careful brows, mouth almost smiling, eyes that don't follow light. Incense bends against the breeze, flowing toward the storeroom door, like a tide pulled by something inland. Rice appears in quiet lines from altar room to threshold, then toward the sealed door. 4 small mounds mark corners as if blessing a square too exact to be casual. Li Wei recognizes effort disguised as routine. He understands he is not a guest in grief. He is an ingredient in remedy. The storeroom opens. Red silk lies smooth over a box the length of a person. Chrysanthemums wilt politely. Beneath the silk, a face pale as wax, lashes dusted like ash, lips finished to bruise red perfection. When he steps back, his pulse leaves heat on the air. The red robes feel heavier. Drums start like a heart-finding pace. Paper money crackles in iron basins. The ritualist guides Li Wei's hand towards silk, towards still fingers arranged with patient care. Cold travels upward, steady and territorial. Words spoken around him, not invisible thread. A veil stirs as if the house itself breathes in. He tries the courtyard gate. Fog stacks itself like walls. The red string pressed into his palm earlier lies torn where his foot falls. Behind him, drums quicken, then slow, then pace him. The lamp by the storeroom does not flicker, it holds. The house chooses steadiness now, not omen. The vow is spoken in a voice that could be anyone's. It sounds like a sentence completing itself. A mark stains Li Wei's wrist, where cold touch skinned thin, circular, precise, the size of a ring. The veil resumes stillness. Chrysanthemums accept ash falling like small gray moths that never fly. At dawn he leaves as if leaving were his idea. His aunt's relief looks like kindness fulfilled. The ritualist tucks paper charms into his pocket with hands that never tremble. The bus breathes warm diesel. Fields recede. The mark on the wrist darkens instead of fading, a bruise that learned geometry. City towers replace trees. His apartment smells unchanged, yet the hallway light resists darkness, turning itself back on with a patient click. 2 bowls clink softly in the kitchen, though he sets only one. Steam rises where no burner is lit. The red robes he never packed sit folded on his chair. The caretaker's scroll lies hidden in a drawer, but he cannot stop rereading its words. It speaks of 2 choices, appeasement or severance. Appeasement means living the marriage, sharing meals, honoring the altar, never resisting. Severance means ritual fire, offerings of blood, and destruction of the jade pendant that binds her. The second path carries warning. If the spirit resists, It may not vanish, it may linger, angrier, untethered. For nights he debates silently, whispering into the dark, though no one listens. But she listens. He begins to notice her watching him with sharper awareness, veil tilted slightly as though gauging his resolve. One night, he dreams of the ritual. He holds the pendant over flame, hears her scream not in anger but betrayal, the sound vibrating so violently the room splits. He wakes drenched in sweat, pendant cool against his chest, though he swore he hid it away. May lies beside him, eyes half open, gaze fixed not on him but on the ceiling as though listening to someone else entirely. He realizes she knows. The apartment grows restless, walls creaking like ships in storm, mirrors rippling when he passes. The chrysanthemums shed petals that rot within hours, only to bloom again by dawn. Each cycle feels like a clock winding tighter, a countdown toward inevitability. He fears both choices equally. To accept means surrendering his life to the dead. To resist means risking something worse than death. And as he stands in the silence of his apartment, veil resting on the chair, he wonders if choice still belongs to him. The apartment becomes ceremonial without his consent. Bowls of fruit appear on the counter, though he never buys them. Incense smolders in corners, though he never lights it. He finds coins arranged on the windowsill, each bearing dates significant to his birth. Neighbors whisper of sounds, drums faintly echoing through pipes, laughter too soft to be mechanical. One evening, when he returns home late, he finds the table set for two, chrysanthemums perfectly fresh, rice steaming though no pot boils. May stands beside the altar that should not exist in his apartment, veil covering her face. She bows once, slow, deliberate, as if rehearsing vows. He stumbles back, but his body betrays him, bending slightly forward in response, compelled by some force beyond courtesy. The air grows dense. A knock sounds at the door. 3 slow raps. He freezes. She turns her veiled face toward the door, then toward him, smile curling beneath fabric. He does not open it, but the sound reverberates through the apartment again, knocking now from walls, from windows, from the floor beneath. It is not someone asking entry. It is the house itself reminding him what belongs here. He hides in the bedroom, salt spread thick across the threshold, but in the morning, the salt is gone, not scattered, not dissolved, simply gone. The veil lies folded at the foot of the bed. His wrist burns under the ring, the circle beneath it carved deeper overnight. He wonders how much of himself is left unclaimed, and how much is already hers. The veil grows heavier in presence, as though it has learned how to take form. He wakes one night to find it suspended over him, hovering like a curtain of red smoke, its hem brushing against his chest. Beneath it the air is colder, thick enough to choke. He sits upright, flings the veil aside, but it dissolves mid-air, leaving only the scent of soil and chrysanthemums pressed into his throat. He stumbles into the hallway, but finds the apartment stretched again, impossibly long, walls closing inward. At the far end stands a figure in red. May, or something using her name, waits, veil still, body unmoving. He calls her name without meaning to, and the sound echoes unnaturally, returning to him delayed, layered in voices that are not his. She lifts one pale hand, fingers rigid, pointing not at him but at the room he left. He turns back to find the door closing slowly, though no one stands behind it. Inside, the room is darker than before, candles extinguished though he never lit them. He backs away until the walls resolve again into his apartment's ordinary shape. But the ordinary feels false now. His ring is warmer than his skin. The circle beneath pulses faintly, like a heartbeat under the surface. He realizes this is not just a haunting, this is possession through intimacy, a vow manifesting itself. She has entered through ceremony, but she will remain through endurance, tethered until he breaks or accepts, and he cannot decide which would be worse. The veil grows heavier in presence, as though it has learned how to take form. He wakes one night to find it suspended over him, hovering like a curtain of red smoke, its hem brushing against his chest. Beneath it the air is colder, thick enough to choke. He sits upright, flings the veil aside, but it dissolves mid-air, leaving only the scent of soil and chrysanthemums pressed into his throat. He stumbles into the hallway, but finds the apartment stretched again, impossibly long, walls closing inward. At the far end stands a figure in red. May, or something using her name, waits, veil still, body unmoving. He calls her name without meaning to, and the sound echoes unnaturally, returning to him delayed, layered in voices that are not his. She lifts one pale hand, fingers rigid, pointing not at him but at the room he left. He turns back to find the door closing slowly, though no one stands behind it. Inside, the room is darker than before, candles extinguished though he never lit them. He backs away until the walls resolve again into his apartment's ordinary shape. but the ordinary feels false now. His ring is warmer than his skin. The circle beneath pulses faintly, like a heartbeat under the surface. He realizes this is not just a haunting, this is possession through intimacy, a vow manifesting itself. She has entered through ceremony, but she will remain through endurance, tethered until he breaks or accepts, and he cannot decide which would be worse. The mark on his wrist deepens until it looks less like a bruise and more like an inscription. When he brushes his fingers over it, the skin feels raised, almost scarred, though he remembers no injury. The ring sits perfectly inside the circle, too perfect to be accidental. On the streets, he begins to notice reflections that do not belong. In the glass of a parked car, he sees himself walking with a woman at his side, her veil trailing faintly in the wind, though when he turns, the sidewalk is empty. At work, students whisper about a figure waiting at the far end of the corridor, pale and still, yet no visitor signs in at the gate. He tries to tell himself fatigue breeds visions, but fatigue does not explain the smell of incense that lingers on his coat or the faint smears of red that stain his desk. At night, when he sits alone in the apartment, he hears movement, delicate, deliberate, as if someone is pacing softly across the tatami mats that no longer exist under his floor. He feels the dip of weight beside him, even when no one is there. The veil begins to appear regularly now, sometimes draped over the chair, sometimes folded on the bed. Once he finds it lying on the bathroom sink, its hem wet, as if it had been washed and left there for him to notice. Each time he avoids touching it, yet each time it returns closer, waiting, patient as ritual. One evening, he climbs the stairwell instead of taking the elevator, hoping movement breaks routine. On the landing of the fourth floor, he sees scraps of red silk nailed into the wall, forming strange geometric patterns. The neighbors hurry past, heads down. He presses a piece with his finger and finds it damp, pulsing faintly like living tissue. His chest tightens. He flees upstairs. That night, the apartment swells with silence, so heavy it feels like air cannot pass through. He lights candles, places bowls of salt water by doors, recalling advice half heard. At 3 a.m., he wakes to sound, not drums now, but breathing, deep and unhurried, filling every room at once. He rises, opens the bedroom door, and finds the corridor lengthened into a dim passage lined with rice mounds. At the far end waits the storeroom door, ajar. The veil glows faintly red within. He cannot move, yet the passage contracts, pulling him forward. He closes his eyes, whispers his name only half aloud, but the syllables echo, caught, repeated back in a voice not his own. The red robe spread across his bed when he returns to himself, embroidered now with jade threads. The wrist mark burns. The chrysanthemums on the table open wide, petals quivering as if gasping for breath. Work falters. His students notice distraction, chalk breaking between his fingers, assignments returned late. He dreams during lessons, glimpses of red silk swaying in corners. He avoids mirrors where possible. At a faculty meeting, he glimpses a veil folded neatly in the reflection of the window, though outside only rain falls. At home, May becomes more elusive. She does not always appear when he expects, but objects insist on her presence. Hairpins on the sink, tea still steaming, robe draped across the bed when he returns. Sometimes she appears only as a shadow stretching longer than her body. He remembers the shopkeeper's warning, don't wear the red, don't say your full name. Yet one evening, he returns to find the robes folded on the chair, crisp and new. They smell faintly of incense and soil. He burns them on the balcony in desperate rebellion, watching silk curl black, but by morning the robes return intact on the chair, unscorched. The smell lingers on his hands despite washing until the skin reddens raw. The red circle on his wrist grows darker beneath the ring, almost carved now, like something branded. He tries to remove the ring, but it resists as though grown into flesh. He no longer sleeps easily. Shadows murmur, doors breathe. He wonders if he has already agreed to vows he never spoke. The apartment becomes a stage of interruptions. The television clicks on at odd hours, screen filling with static thick enough to ripple. From it comes faint chanting, words too old to match subtitles. He unplugs the set. It hums back to life with no cords attached. He hides the jade pendant in a drawer, but it returns to her throat the next morning, as though sewn there in sleep. May's reflection develops a strange delay. Her movements in glass arrive moments later, sometimes with expressions that do not match the real. Once he sees her in the mirror smile wide, eyes closed in bliss, while in reality she is expressionless, back turned stirring soup. The chrysanthemums wilt, then revive again, cycle repeating without soil or water. He asks her once if she feels well, voice cracking under the strain of pretending. She tilts her head with a softness that unsettles more than anger. As long as you stay, she whispers. He is not sure if the words were aloud or inside. He begins carrying the salt packet from the temple in his pocket. It grows lighter with each passing day, though he never uses it. At night, when he checks, only a few grains remain, clinging stubbornly to the paper's seam, like the final sand in an hourglass. Dreams shift into repetition. Always the same corridor, the same rice mounds, the same talismans clinging to doors like yellow skin. In the dream, the storeroom is his own bedroom. When he pushes it open, chrysanthemums fall in slow motion, petals catching against his face. Behind them, a figure in red rises slowly, as though waterlogged, veil heavy with damp. He wakes each time with lungs burning, as though he had been holding his breath. May lies beside him, hair strewn across the pillow like black threads, but her breathing does not stir the sheet. When dawn comes, neighbors complain of sounds in the hallway, drums muffled but rhythmic. He smiles it off, blames old pipes, yet at night he hears them too. Soft beats through the floorboards, steady as a second heart. He finds burnt paper near the stairwell, flecked with symbols scorched halfway gone. Once he picks up a piece and finds his own name written in hurried strokes, then swallowed by ash. He carries it inside, tucks it into a drawer, but the ash stains persist on his fingers, gritty as bone dust. He rinses them away, yet when he lifts his hands again, the circle on his wrist remains vivid, refusing to fade. The salt sits in a dish near the bedroom door, grains spread wider each night. By morning they gather closer, tightened into a small mound as though swept from within. He wakes to faint footprints on the balcony, water-dark impressions where no rain has fallen. The orchids on the sill bloom with irregular haste, petals crowding like whispers. May continues her routines, almost comforting, arranging groceries, folding shirts, moving as if the apartment has always been hers. But sometimes he notices gestures that stop too quickly, like she's mimicking a role learned too late. When he returns home one evening, she is seated in the half-light, hair still damp though she hasn't showered. The jade pendant glints at her neck, resting heavier than its size should allow. The pendant swings once without touch. He blinks, and for a moment the pendant is not strung but pressed into pale skin, as if grown there. He looks again and everything is ordinary. Dinner simmers, chopsticks clink, she smiles faintly. He eats slowly, the taste of earth underneath. Afterward, when he washes dishes, the window fogs from steam. In its reflection, her smile lingers longer than her face. He turns and she has already left the room. He visits a small temple 3 streets away, a place that lives mostly in the shade of taller buildings. The caretaker sweeps leaves that never fall there. A shelf of paper charms leans toward the door like an audience inclined to listen. He carries questions as a posture rather than words, an arrangement of shoulders learned in the village and worn since. The caretaker's attention settles on his wrist, not the ring but what sits beneath it, an outline pressed into skin that metal cannot explain. Old paper smells like books after rain. There are explanations that do not soothe. The afterlife disdains unmarried souls. Bonds can be stitched backward to correct omissions. Living hands sometimes finish tasks the dead left undone. Families sometimes choose anchors strong enough to hold 2 worlds briefly together. He hears the shape of advice that belongs to thresholds, salt, red thread, rooms that face east, water bowls to catch what wanders at night. There is talk of release that costs more than entry, debt settled with offerings and actions, never speeches. He walks home with a packet of salt and a thin envelope of inked paper that warms in his pocket like a timid animal. The afternoon is ordinary on the surface. Laundry, a window he is meant to clean, a neighbor scolding a child in the hall. Inside the apartment, quiet has depth again. The veil is not visible, yet every reflective surface seems to listen. At the sink a second cup stands drying, bead of water trembling at its lip, refusing to fall. The rain begins without clouds and lasts 3 days. The elevator decides to stop most often on the 4th floor. No one entering, no one leaving, doors parting and closing with polite confusion. Paper confetti, half melted red, appears near the fire stairs, where wind does not reach. He sweeps it into a dustpan, and later finds it carefully rearranged on the counter in symmetrical arcs, as if someone practiced blessing in miniature. Sleep tilts again. In the final hour before dawn, he feels the bed dip with a weight that does not trouble the sheets. The air beside his face cools as though a curtain has moved. A scent of wine drifts, stale and celebratory. In the wardrobe, garments hang obediently, but a veil edges into view, not hung, not folded, simply present, as if the idea of it has enough density to cast shadow. He chooses not to touch it. May moves through rooms like someone trained to leave no footprint, and still the floorboards speak twice when she passes, first with her weight, then with a lagging echo, another cadence draped over hers. She cooks with patience he has not seen in years, hands held just above steam, as if blessing food before letting heat take it. He hears soft knocks along the corridor, some evenings in an old rhythm he cannot place. He counts them, 4, then 2, then 1, as if a door is being sealed. On the third night, the chrysanthemums open anew, petals rebuilding from edges inward, as though time is reversible within the vase. Paperwork is brief at the registry office, pens glide as though practiced in advance. The clerk attaches a photograph where their faces lean slightly inward, not touching but agreeing. The ring he buys is modest, a circle that promises little beyond presence. When he slides it on, the old mark beneath it aligns too perfectly, as if the metal found a groove cut earlier by something colder. He notices small avoidances that do not announce themselves. She never crosses the temple courtyard on market day, choosing the longer alley with the sickly camphor tree. She never stands fully in sunlight, preferring awnings in dusk. She lingers at mirrors only long enough to smooth a sleeve. Reflection introduces a constant, almost charming delay, a heartbeat between body and glass. He pretends it is a trick of old silver. The apartment feels warmer with 2 sets of movements to occupy it. Plants perk. Neighbors start complaining less about the flickering hallway light. The chrysanthemums refuse to brown. He discovers a jade pendant in the pocket of the coat she has begun to call hers without saying so. The stone is cool, oiled smooth by the kind of handling that belongs to heirlooms. A thread pulls through the top, red gone to rust. He remembers, not as a scene but as a temperature, the flash of green against silk in a room that dampens sound. The smell at the baseboards has retreated to corners. The rice cooker clicks off at proper times. A long exhale resettles the apartment's walls. Birds return to the ledge. Routine insists itself. Lectures, grading, the taste of chalk dust. A cafeteria lunch he does not remember choosing. He meets her outside the market beneath awnings that drip yesterday's rain. She stands with the posture of someone who has practiced being unnoticeable. She carries a small bag of oranges and studies prices like she is translating. He speaks without planning to, asking if the stall is open. No dialogue exchanges in memory, only the sensation of company choosing itself. She becomes May in his thoughts before introductions complete, a name that strides ahead of explanation. Their paths cross again on the bus, then at the bookstore where she studies a shelf of family histories, as if searching for an entry misfiled under strangers. She prefers corners, the far seat, the quiet. Her presence irons noise flat. Days fold. She is there more often than not. A coat on the chair back, hairpins in the dish by the sink, a cup on the counter drying at a tilt. The apartment eases under an arrangement it seems to remember, and for a week the hallway switch behaves, consenting to darkness until he asks for light. The pot warms only when he tells it to. A veil does not hang in the closet, or he does not look. He notices, with pleasant surprise that feels prearranged, his wrist mark paling at the edges like a bruise that lost its argument. Nights smooth out. Somewhere a train crosses a bridge at the same time every evening, and the apartment breathes with it, steady, almost content. Home is supposed to dilute villages into memory, but the apartment seems to remember things it was never told. The hallway light resists the off position, easing back on with a courtesy that feels like testing boundaries. In the kitchen, the pot warms without flame. Steam hangs low, faintly sweet with rice wine he does not own. 2 bowls wait in parallel like eyes. A second toothbrush appears in a glass with bristles still wet, a domestic detail slid into place without spectacle. The wrist mark persists, a red band too clean-edged to be irritation. He scrubs until skin brightens angrily. The circle remains, cool to the touch, as if painted from inside. Sleep behaves like water, brief, shallow, easily disturbed. When dreams come, they carry a pressure change, as though a door opens somewhere along an unmarked corridor. In the dream he walks the storeroom path, counting 4 mounds of rice, but the house is his apartment, and the storeroom door is his bedroom closet. Garments hang obediently, yet weight sways in the dark without draft. The veil hangs from the inside hook, hem damp enough to print a faint crescent on the floorboards. Morning light renders everything ordinary again, except for the lingering scent of damp soil at the baseboards. He opens windows. The smell remains, threaded through paint. A vase he does not remember buying holds chrysanthemums that have not wilted. He leaves for work and notices, in the reflection of the elevator door, a delay as if the hallway's image must catch up to him. He lives a week inside hesitation and then chooses. The scroll lies open on the floor, corners pinned by bowls of salt water that halo the room with a thin chemical brightness. He arranges 9 paper charms into a gate across the threshold, a mirror facing east, the window cracked, so night air can carry what needs to go. The instructions are plain in a way that feels cruel. Wake what binds, heat it to refusal, feed the flame with a drop of living blood so the dead cannot pretend the offering is empty. He cleans the jade pendant and threads it back through the old red cord, sets it above a metal dish, and steadies a lighter beneath until the stone drinks heat. The apartment prepares its own answer. The hallway lengthens without stretching. The elevator on the landing opens to no one and does not close. The chrysanthemums tighten their petals as if bracing. Behind him the veil finds form again, not draped, not hanging, simply present, a red field where air should be. He holds his hand over the dish until one bead of blood falls. The flame changes tone, taking on a breathing rhythm that does not match his. The ring on his wrist warms to discomfort. The skin beneath pulses in a smaller, separate heartbeat. Choice ends. Procedure begins. The pendant resists like ice, pretending it cannot melt. Heat stacks upon heat until the metal ring around the cord glows, the stone catching a star of light deep in its body, as if something watches from within. The veil's surface ripples, red thinning, darkening, brightening again in slow tides. He reads as the scroll orders, dates, directions, names of winds that were never his, steps to untie a knot made by people who are not in the room. The apartment answers with sound, 3 knocks from nowhere, then 4, then a pause as if counting. The smell of wet soil rises out of the floorboards, layered with wine and ash, the exact scent from the village storeroom. In the mirror, he is not a man at an altar improvised from a stove. He is the process by which houses remember. The veil leans closer without moving. Images crowd the glass without touching it. The wooden beams at his aunt's, the storeroom strung with paper, the coffin's lip, the portrait with careful brows. The meaning fits together with a simplicity that hurts. The ritual back then was meant to guide a restless soul to an older relative, to settle debt across branches of a family. Somewhere, a step slipped. The living proxy became the anchor. The bond entered the warm body instead of the waiting grave. Heat pulls a hairline crack through jade. The sound is small and decisive, like a hinge changing its mind. Cracking is not breaking. The pendant holds, complaining in thin voices only stone can make. He increases the heat, and the scroll's cautions take on the weight of prophecy. When the cord sears, the room will reach for breath. When it reaches, do not answer. He feels the air thicken as expected, a tide rising against his chest. Reflex insists on inhalation. He teaches his body stillness. The cord smokes, twisting, blackening into resemblance of what it was. The veil swells outward, in a soundless exhale, and the apartment contracts around him, walls shivering like something suppressing a shudder. Weight sits on his shoulders, the way hands do when guiding a bow across a string. He holds his breath until color rims his vision. The crack in the jade widens, a vein of dusk through green. Salt water begins to tremble in the bowls, not from draft but from pressure. Little seas about to lift. The hallway drums return, far at first, then nearer. The old cadence that once marked vows. He does not turn to look. The scroll demands an ending with fire, water, and an exit made clean. He lowers the pendant into the dish, pours the left-hand bowl over it, and the flame snarls out in a wet hiss that feels like a word being swallowed. Something passes through him. It feels like winter stepping from shadow into sun. He inhales without meaning to, breaking the rule he promised to keep. The veil closes that last inch. Mourning is acceptable again in the limited way. Aftermaths allow. The altar has retreated into bare counter. Fruit gone, ash missing, bowls drying in their cabinet, as though no water was ever warmed there. The veil is nowhere. The hallway returns to its common length. The elevator behaves like machinery rather than a mouth. He sits on the edge of the bed and waits to feel victory. It does not arrive. Instead, a quiet emptiness spreads from the wrist inward, a cold that learns his veins, then his lungs, then the careful spaces behind his eyes. At work, he stands before students and finds their attention sliding around him. Not avoidance, the softer thing, a failure to catch. He speaks, pages rustle. When he passes a mirror, he sees the lessons still in progress, while he himself lags a step behind, reflection obeying the room rather than the body. On the streets, pedestrians fold their paths a little to avoid him without recognizing they have adjusted. At home, the key moves cleanly in the lock, but he senses the apartment greeting him with the neutrality reserved for fixtures. The pendant lies in the dish in 2 clean halves, edges pale as bone. The circle beneath the ring has stopped burning, and now looks like something healed long ago. Chrysanthemums finally brown, petals collapsing inward without revival. For the first night in weeks, the switch turns the hallway light off, and it stays off. He watches the dark hold. The silence is complete in a way living rooms rarely manage. Tenants in the building come and go with the churn of a city that sheds names easily. Weeks pass, then more. The rent remains paid. The plants require water. The clock in the kitchen keeps a tidy beat that he no longer feels. One evening, he stands at the window and understands the exchange he made. Severance did not dissolve the bond into nothing. It laid the path in both directions and then asked which traveler would continue. She has crossed. He has remained. He is not followed by drums because the drums are inside the walls now, a pacing that belongs to the structure when the corridors settle after midnight. In the lobby, a new family reads the mailbox labels. They speak softly, smiling at promises of a quiet building. The landlord nods with the unmarked expression of someone who has seen cycles. Upstairs, the apartment waits with its ordinary face. Cupboards closing properly, lights cooperative, a chair angled for the human shape habits leave behind. When the door opens and new keys scrape metal, the room accepts new patterns with a patient inhale. From his corner near the hallway, he notices small things, how the mirror takes an extra heartbeat to gather their faces, how the kitchen pot sometimes warms without command, how a veil-shaped absence hangs where light should be. He watches gently, the way a house watches. In time they may carry salt, red thread, advice from the temple. In time they may leave quickly, as others did. The apartment will remember, and so will he. That's all for tonight. If the silence in your room feels a little heavier now, don't worry. Sometimes stories linger longer than the voices that tell them. Keep your doors half closed, your lights half dimmed, and if you hear footsteps that stop just outside your door, don't answer. We'll meet again when another tale decides it isn't finished. Until then, goodbye, but don't stay away too long. The shadows here remember who listens.